Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our TEPSA Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership here at the Texas Elementary Principals and Supervisors Association. We are thrilled every week to bring you different thought leaders from around the world, and this week, we have a good friend of mine and one of my favorite superintendents on the planet, and that is Ben Gilpin out of Michigan. Ben, thank you so much for being here. Give us a little bit about who you are.
Well, hey there, Todd. It's great to see you again. This is second time in a couple of weeks. So a little bit about me, Ben Gilpin, and I am the current superintendent in Newaygo Public Schools. This is my second year in the superintendent role. And for those of you that have never heard of Newaygo, you probably have heard of Michigan, and you've probably heard of Lansing. And there's another town about an hour and a half from Lansing called Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids, pretty big city. I would tell you Newaygo is about 45 minutes north of Grand Rapids. Here's the beautiful thing. If you ever want to come up, Todd was up here, great, beautiful country, living on the river. It is 45 minutes, actually by 40 minutes from Lake Michigan. Get some gorgeous sunsets, some beach time. It's a pretty nice part of the country. Couple things about me. This is my 25th year in education. I've been a fifth grade teacher. I've been an elementary principal and now a superintendent. I've done quite a bit with learning spaces, with vulnerability. I'm a big Brene Brown fan. And really, for the most part, I would say leadership. And I've worked with Michigan Virtual. I've worked with MEMSPA. I've worked with NAESP. And I'm just all about growing leadership. So here we are, Todd.
Well, and Ben, you've been somebody that's been really instrumental in my own growth as a leader, which is why I'm super excited to have you on to have this conversation today. Because as you mentioned, and when you were sharing just then, you served many years as an elementary principal. Mm-hmm. And then you made that leap into that superintendent position. What kind of helped you decide, you know what, I think I want to take a new step? Because for some people, being in the classroom is all they ever want to do. And it's amazing. Some people get that itch to be a campus leader, and then some like, I'm done there. Like, I don't ever want to be more than an assistant principal or a principal. But then some get the itch for a little bit more. And so what kind of led to you seeing superintendency in your path?
I'm pretty sure you just had this guy on your on the TEPSA Talk, Jimmy Parsons.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So Jimmy and I had a lot of conversations. One conversation in particular was he encouraged me when things are going great, when you are feeling good about things, that is the ideal time to try something different. And I really was kind of taken back by that. And I was like, really? And he's like, yep, that's the ideal time. And so I kind of go back to as an elementary teacher, I love the classroom. 9 years in the classroom, it was my jam. And I was enjoying it so much that I decided, well, I'm going to try that. And so I took the leap of faith and I interviewed and I nailed it and I got it. And then I would tell you that I was probably in year 8 or 9 of being an elementary principal. And I feel like I'd hit that same sweet spot. And then all of a sudden, as we all know, the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, I knew I could not leave my people at that moment. Yeah. And so 2 things were going on, the pandemic, but then the second piece was my youngest was in high school and I didn't want to take him out of that spot. So once he graduated, once we got through, quote unquote, got through the pandemic, I felt like it was time to stretch myself. And there's also another quote that, you know, you're not going to learn your most in your comfort zone. So when you stretch yourself, when you step out of that comfort zone, that's when the real learning happens. And that's when I stretched myself and started putting my shoe in the ring to see if I could be a superintendent.
Well, you know, I love that story, and I love being able to follow along with that throughout the years and kind of see you kind of make those decisions. And then you get this position. You get to be now the superintendent over in Newaygo. And I got the pleasure of kind of come and tour and see the campuses and see a little bit behind the title. because I think we all kind of always feel like we know what certain job titles do until we get in that job title and realize there's a lot more that happens than what we realize. And so when you stepped into this role as a superintendent, what really surprised you that came with leading from the top that you were not expecting, or you were like, oh, okay, that's part of what this is too?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can tell you, so the parts that it's difficult to prepare for, it would be very similar to when I stepped into my role as a building principal. I remember my very first year as a building principal, the number one thing that was coming at me was special education law. And as a superintendent, it wasn't necessarily special ed law, but it was law. And those were some of the things that immediately I didn't completely see coming. And I had to get comfortable with that. The second thing, as a superintendent, I had to become more familiar and more acquainted with negotiations.
Yeah.
And so those were some of the big ones. But what I would tell you, for me, what I put as my staple, and I did this as a teacher, I did this as a building principal, and I try so hard to do this as a superintendent, is I want to listen first.
Yeah.
And so I believe if I can listen, if people can be heard, if people can be understood, then we can problem solve together. And so listening, to me, that is the one thing. It sounds so easy, and yet not very many people really do it well.
Yeah.
And so I try really hard to be a good listener.
Well, being a school principal, you kind of have, like, if you're an elementary principal, you kind of know what the typical elementary personality is, and you learn how to work with that. Middle school teachers are a whole new breed. Secondary, high school teachers are a different breed. And then you've got all the sports, and you've got maintenance, and you've got custodian, and you've got bus, and you've got cafeteria. You've got everybody. And, as a building principal, you can really get to know those people and kind of work with what's happening on that building campus. But when you're in the superintendent role, you've got people going every which way with different priorities depending on the campus they're at or the office they're in. How do you manage working with all the personalities where A, you don't lose your mind, but B, you are learning how to listen to all of them so differently and be respectful of their time and their beliefs and their importance things, but still prioritizing what's important for the district?
Yeah. And you just nailed it. And another really good question. So a couple of different things. Let's go all the way back to the classroom. So in the classroom, there were a couple of things that I truly believed. First thing I believed was I can only control what I can control.
Yeah.
So all those little behaviors, I can't control them all. I can deal with them, and I can support them, and I can help them, but I can't control all of them. So what can I control? That's number one. Number two, I wanted to have an awareness. And so it was really important to me as a classroom teacher. Every single one of my kids, I wanted to know their strengths. I wanted to know their weaknesses. I wanted to know what made them tick, what kind of motivated them, inspired them. I wanted to know what areas that maybe they struggled at home. So I tried to get to know the families as well, but it was all about awareness. When I became a building principal, the same thing could be said. It was all about awareness. And all of those things led to being a superintendent. And as a superintendent, I knew I couldn't control everything. But communication matters, and having an awareness, what is going on in the district. So that level of communication to me has been critical. The other part is when you come into situations in leadership, what do you stand for? I mean, let's make no bones about it. You can't stand for everything.
Yeah.
So we have to have our core values. We have to have the things that matter to us. And so coming into a new space, what mattered to me? And what mattered to me is communication. What mattered to me is how do we treat other people? What mattered to me is, do people feel supported? Do they feel valued? Do they feel like they're heard? What mattered to me is that we aren't going to try to get by. We are going to do things the right way. And when you do things the right way, guess what? It's going to be hard at times.
Yeah.
And what I have discovered as a superintendent is that there are some people that embrace change and they embrace kind of feeling uncomfortable, and there are people that don't.
Mhm.
And I have to make a decision. And my style is I want to walk beside them. I
Yeah.
want to support them. However, everybody's reaction is a little bit different. And that's where, again, you can only control what you can control.
Well, and saying that, I think my next question then is one of the things that always kept me from having any interest in the superintendent position is that as a principal, I had to deal with all those personalities, but also a lot of the families and the public from judging decisions we were making as a campus. But it was just very focused as a campus. I know when you get into that superintendent role, everybody has opinions about everything. How do you protect yourself and not allow all of those sometimes correct perspectives, but often misinformed perspectives not control the way you view yourself or your own emotions?
Ooh. Yeah.
And you may not do this well. I know that I never could. This is why I was like, there's no way I could separate that. I couldn't handle that, but that's why I can't be a superintendent. But I'd love to hear how you manage it.
Well, so this is a complex one. First off, let's go back to let's everybody needs to hear this. If you put yourself in a position of leadership, the majority of your messages in your inbox, in your phone, when you see people, are not going to say, "You're amazing." When you take a position of leadership, people will find you to tell you what their grievances are, what their issues are, what their struggles are. The vast majority of things that you get from people are going to be things that they are struggling with, and they want you to fix them, or they want to be heard.
Right.
And that's sometimes when people look at leadership, they glorify it to be shaking hands and kissing babies.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Even this past week, I was at a football game, and at the football game, I ended up having to be one of those people that had on the vests and kind of blocked traffic and did some of those things. That's not a glorified position. I'm not out there handing people T-shirts and saying you're amazing.
Yeah.
For those people that are, good for them, but that's not the role that I was doing. Now, number one, so understand what the role is. If you're in leadership, you're gonna have some tough stuff come your way. The next piece is I'm a believer in putting a menu of communication out there. So in our very first year, we redid the entire website. We've got an app for the district now. We have social media that we update. We have an all-call system.
Yeah.
We have what's called a Skylert. So we push out messages that way. I do both weekly and monthly and quarterly newsletters. My weekly and monthly are going to go to staff and people that have kids in the district. My quarterly is to the entire community. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to over communicate.
Right.
Because the last thing I want someone to say is, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I also have a TikTok, so I try to put some things out on TikTok that are sending a positive message as well. So that's the whole social media piece. But then really getting to the crux of your question, how am I kind of taking care of myself? How am I able to kind of let go of some of that quote unquote noise? And I can tell you, as a human being, sometimes I feel like I do it really well, and sometimes I don't.
Right.
I enjoy physical activity. I enjoy running. I enjoy golfing. I enjoy biking. I enjoy pickleball. I enjoy physical activity. That's a good thing for me. The number one way to get me in a better mood is to try to make me laugh or get me to laugh. So I realize that that's an important piece. But the other thing is, and I'm very blessed by this, is I have a space, and you were there, and it's very calm. And so my house, my space is just a very calm spot where I can just kind of take a breath. And what I would say to all people out there is when you have the noise coming at you, find a space that you can just take a breath. And maybe it's your car, maybe it's your house, maybe it's somewhere in between, but you've got to find a space where you can take a breath. And I know when the noise gets loud, I've got to take a breath.
I love that. Well, Ben, at the same time, one of the things we talk about at TEPSA is the importance of joining this association so that you can collaborate and connect with other leaders. Sometimes when we're staying within our district, it's the same ideas that are circulating around. They may be great ideas, but it's so important to survive and thrive in these positions to find other like-minded individuals that you can connect and learn and grow alongside. And I know you can also speak to the fact that you are who you are as a leader because of the wide variety of people you've surrounded yourself with that you've met on social media or at conferences or being as part of your state association. So talk a little bit about why that is so important, no matter what your role is, whether it's assistant principal or all the way up to the superintendent.
It really is. I mean, truly, I can't understand. I can't overstate enough the need for some type of a network. And that network, and here's the thing, if your network is just in your building per se, or just in your district, that's not a bad thing. But keep in mind, what if you extended that? What if you extended it to your region? And then what if you extended it to your state? And what if you extended it to the entire earth?
Yeah.
I mean, you got the whole globe. I've tried really hard to have perspectives from different people. I reach out to Jimmy. I reach out to you. I reach out to Brad Gustafson. I reach out to Joe Sanfilippo. I reach out to Aaron Becker. I reach out to just a variety of people throughout the country that I can lean into and just give perspectives and say, what about you? What about this? And here's what oftentimes happens when you have a network of people that you can just kind of brainstorm with or just kind of bounce ideas off of. What you're going to get is oftentimes the end of the spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to get ideas way over there or way over here, and you're going to be like, ooh, that's not really me. I tend to be one of those people that I end up finding that middle ground and I end up making that my own. Yeah. But I'm getting different perspectives. Yeah. And oftentimes what having a network will do is they're going to bring up something that you maybe didn't think of. And to me, that's where the value is.
Yeah.
The value in the network is that they're going to bring something up that was essentially for all of us, because we all have them, a blind spot.
Well, and I think too, one of the things that's been beneficial for both of us is when you surround yourself with that variety of opinions and perspectives, what ends up happening is that they will be really honest with you and sometimes bring things to light or mention things that other people may not be comfortable bringing to you because they're not that close to you. And so that's been, I think, a really powerful thing as well. Well, Ben, as people are listening today and they're getting all this great advice and really good information, and you hope they just walk away with at least just one thing, what is one takeaway you really want assistant principals, supervisors, superintendents to hear from you today?
The one thing. So the one thing is, here's what I can guarantee you. Throughout your year, at some point, you are going to deal with adversity. You are going to deal with a challenge. You're going to be sitting in the crap. Mm-hmm. And so here's the deal. When we all get to those spaces, because we all will, how do you view that? Now, I've tried really hard through books, through podcasts, through conversations with my network, through my own personal therapy, through all the things. I've tried to look at all those pieces of adversity, and I've tried to look at them as opportunities.
Right.
And so the one thing I would leave people is the fact that you're going to go through hard times. When it happens, are you willing to look at it as an opportunity? And here's what I'll say to people. Before I became superintendent in Newaygo, I interviewed multiple times, and I was the bridesmaid. I was runner-up multiple times. And here's the narrative that was in my head. It didn't make sense to me, and I could have gotten mad. But at the end of the day, I said to myself, this is an opportunity. And I don't know exactly why it happened this way, but maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I'll look back and it will all make sense. So how we choose to look at things as opportunities rather than challenges can really shape our mindset and shape where we go from there.
I love that. Well, Ben, if people want to connect with you to either ask questions, check out some of the stuff you've done, or even consider having more conversations with you, how can they connect with you?
That's pretty easy. So on Twitter, or as we now call it X, I'm at Benjamin Gilpin. I'm also on TikTok, and on TikTok I'm at ben.gilpin. You can go both of those routes, and I'm also on Facebook too. So feel free to hit me up on there as well. And I'm always able to kind of dive into any conversations. So I appreciate the opportunity, Todd. And most of all, I just want people to know that just by participating, just by taking some of these things in, your own perspectives are going to be expanded. So well done.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the TEPSA Talk Podcast. You can join us again next week to get all new insights and information from our next guest. And you can go check out all the past episodes on Apple Podcasts or Spotify today. Have a great day, everybody.